My name is Captain Andrew Peterson. Tonight I want to tell you about a soldier you will never see in headlines, a soldier who never chased medals or fame, a soldier whose entire life was built on a single promise. His name is Sergeant Michael Anderson. I met Michael long before the world started calling him brave. Back then he was just a quiet farm boy from Iowa with eyes that were always watching, always listening. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight, like he had already learned that some things don't need decoration. Michael grew up in a town where the cornfields were taller than most dreams. His father worked endless shifts at a grain warehouse, coming home with hands cracked by dust and labor. His mother cleaned houses to keep food on the table. There were no luxury vacations, no fancy plans for the future, just survival, dignity, and family. But there was one man in Michael's life who planted something deeper than survival. His grandfather, a veteran of the Korean War. He never bragged about battles. He never spoke about how many enemies he faced. He spoke about men freezing in trenches, about sharing the last sip of water, about holding hands in the dark when nobody knew if dawn would come. Michael didn't fall in love with war. He fell in love with brotherhood. At 10 years old, he told his mother he wanted to join the army. She laughed, brushing dirt off his cheek, thinking it was just a boy's fantasy. But Michael never forgot that thought. It stayed with him through school, through football games, through long afternoons fixing fences with his father. On the night before he left for basic training, his mother came into his room carrying a small Bible. She didn't lecture him. She didn't cry. She sat beside him and said quietly, "Promise me you won't be brave for no reason." Michael didn't fully understand those words, but he promised her one thing he did understand. "I will come back." Fort Benning stripped the farm boy out of him in days. The yelling never stopped. Sleep disappeared. Muscles burned in places he didn't know existed. But Michael never complained. When others cursed, he focused. When others faltered, he steadied them. I saw him carry gear that wasn't his. I saw him give away his last energy bar. He wasn't loud about kindness. He lived it. One night after a brutal march, he collapsed behind the barracks, vomiting into the dirt. Most soldiers would have stayed down. Michael stood up when he saw another recruit struggling to lace trembling fingers into boots. Without a word, Michael knelt and tied them for him. That was when I knew what kind of soldier he would become. His first deployment was to Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The roads were dust and danger. Every convoy felt like threading a needle through death. One morning, an IED exploded behind our lead vehicle. Smoke filled the air. Chaos followed. Inside the wreckage was 19-year-old Jason Ruiz. Before anyone could stop him, Michael ran toward the flames. He didn't think about bullets. He didn't think about fire. He thought about a promise. He kicked the door open, grabbed Jason, and dragged him out with burning hands and bleeding knuckles. Jason survived. That night he told Michael, "You saved my life." Michael didn't answer. He just sat beside him until he fell asleep. Weeks later, we lost Corporal Andrew Lewis to a sniper. Michael was asked to write to the family. He stared at that blank page for hours. How do you write about a son who died protecting his brothers? How do you explain that bravery looks a lot like fear mixed with love? He wrote, "Your son was not alone. He was surrounded by brothers who will carry his memory forever." Then he walked outside and cried until the desert swallowed his tears. The ambush that changed him forever happened in 2010. Gunfire from the hills, vehicles scattered, confusion everywhere. Michael's best friend, Staff Sergeant Daniel Miller, was hit and fell into the open road. Michael crawled through gunfire, grabbed his vest, and dragged him behind cover. Daniel was bleeding badly. He looked at Michael and whispered, "Tell my wife I kept my promise." A medevac helicopter arrived just in time. Daniel survived, but he lost his leg. When Michael visited him in the hospital weeks later, Daniel held his newborn son and said, "You pulled me out of hell so I could hold him." Michael said nothing. His eyes said everything. Coming home was not peace. Fireworks became gunfire. Crowds became threats. Silence became heavy. His mother once asked, "Are you still over there?" Michael replied, "Part of me never left." He became a high school history teacher. not to talk about war, but to talk about responsibility. He told students that courage isn't charging into danger. Courage is carrying someone else when your legs want to quit. Every Sunday he sits on his porch with his mother. She holds his hands, hands that once pulled men from fire, and she smiles because her son kept his promise. Michael Anderson didn't become famous, but he became something far greater. He became someone people can count on, and that is what a real American soldier looks like.